Welcome back to another episode of BassQuest. This is Caleb, and today we're going to get into part 2 in our series on how to properly break down a lake. And this is going to be, again, helpful for you guys that are going to tune into my live stream so that you actually know what I'm talking about when we get into the nitty-gritty details about how to do this. In today's video, we're going to define the difference between structure and cover because those are not interchangeable terms. Additionally, we're going to get on the mapping software and I'm going to give you visual examples of the structures that you need to be aware of, as well as properly define those structures for you. Make sure you check out the description below. I've got all this written out for you so you can use that to follow along. Feel free to copy and paste it and print it off as a document. I did the same thing with the previous Google Maps study from the last video. That's linked above. Now, what's the difference between structure and cover? Structure is just the natural composition or substrate of the lake. This could be ridges, humps, points, etc. Again, on a topographical map, when we're looking at the world around us, we see ridges, we see mountains, hills, valleys. Those are the structures. In contrast, cover is just an object that's on or within the structure itself. Again, a topo map example would be your house, your car, trees. So when we're talking about cover on the lake, we're talking about docks, trees, laydowns, stumps, aquatic vegetation such as the grass, hydrilla that grows into the lake. That's all cover. So now that we understand the difference between structure and cover, we're going to jump on the Navionics web app here, and I'm going to go over the structures that I think that you need to know. If you're liking the video so far, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. And if you want to follow along with the playlist or any of my other live streams, go ahead and subscribe. It's the icon over here. Once you click that, you can subscribe. It'll turn gray, and then click the little bell in the side. That'll give you notifications when I post a new video so you don't miss anything. Without further ado, let's jump into this map study. Now that we've covered the difference between structure and cover, we can get into the most important structures you need to be looking at on your home lake. All right, first of all, a channel. A channel is just the original river passage or creek passage in your lake. So if you look on Chickamauga right here, where you can see we've got this deep center line running through the lake. And all that is the original river gorge and river channel. This is what the river would have looked like before all this other stuff to the side here was flooded. Now, in addition to the main river channel, we're also going to see creek channels. Let me zoom in here. This is Chester Frost. You can see here is a creek channel, and these are actually marked on Navionics. I'm going to zoom out. We're going to go over to another one. Here's Wolf Teaver. Again, this one's a lot more defined. So we can watch this creek channel as it moves its way back into the creek and cuts its way through. This was the original creek channel. All right, easy enough, right? Also, when we're talking about channels, we talk about channel swings. You'll hear pros and a lot of anglers toss this around a lot. And a channel swing is basically just a turn in a channel. So you see this main channel coming down, it hits this bluff wall and turns. And a lot of times a bluff wall is part of a channel swing. Where guys talk about fishing channel swings, a lot of times they're fishing a bluff wall or bluff wall transitions. Additionally, if we look into the creek here, here's Wolf Teaver Creek, you can have creek channel swings as well, and those can be effective to fish. Now, another thing I want to talk about here is a drain. These can often be confused with a creek channel, but they're related to rain water or running water. So when you get a rain event in the backs of some of these pockets, you'll notice that there's water coming in. That would be a drain. And a lot of times they have their own little trough or ditch that runs out with them. Another thing that would technically be a drain is areas that relate to wet weather springs and things like that. One of the most common main lake structures that you hear a lot of guys talk about is the point. A point is basically just a protrusion of land that runs out into the water system. So if we look right here, we've got this section of land that juts out into the water, and that ridge continues underwater right here. And that's what a point is. Here's another example of a protrusion that runs out into a point. Now there's different kinds of points. So if we look right here, here's our main river. This point right here at Chester Frost, this is considered a main lake point because it's adjacent to the main river channel. Again, on this other side, here's a rounded off main lake point, and it continues into almost like a ridge that runs out underwater. Now there's a difference between that and what we call a secondary point. So if we move into the creek here, this point that is inside the creek is called a secondary point. Again, this point is a secondary point. So secondary points are points that are found off of the main river in secondary areas such as major creeks, coves, or backwater areas. All right, at this time I want to talk to you about what a ridge is because it's very important to understanding points. A lot of times a point is just a ridge that's above water that continues on underneath the water. Now some of these ridges that are underwater can continue on to form humps, such as this one right here, and a ridge can also end up forming a saddle to an island. A hump is basically just an island that's not protruding out of the water. You can see there's one right here in Chester Frost. A lot of guys actually ruin their props in the wintertime on this particular hump. Here, we have a much bigger main lake hump. A saddle is just a dip in a ridge, and it can a lot of times connect a hump to a main point, or it can just be a low spot in a ridge. You can see there's one right here. All right, let's talk about another common structure that we find in a lake, and that is a ledge. A ledge, simply put, is just a drop off or a break in depth. If I zoom in right here, you can see here's a ledge running along the main river. On the Tennessee River, a lot of times when guys are talking about ledge fishing, they're talking about a break from shallow water to deep water. It's usually an area that's been flooded during the flooding of the reservoir where it breaks off into the original river channel. So you can see if we run down through here, these are all ledges going along this side. You can see the tight contour lines, and that shows that we have a break off in depth. Now ledges can be subtle or they can be very abrupt like this right here. It's all relative. And you can find ledges in creek systems as well as the main lake. Here's a creek channel ledge. Additionally, ledges are not only offshore spots. We talked about, again, these bluff wall areas. When you have a bluff, you're basically just fishing a ledge that's pushed up to the bank. So in other words, it's not offshore. Here's another example of an area that if you fish down through here, you would technically be ledge fishing, but you would not be fishing offshore. All right, let's talk about flats. A flat is just a large area like this right here with consistent depth range. We can see we've got really wide areas here in between depth contour lines. Here on the Tennessee River, a flat usually entails sandbars, which is what this is right here. These are usually harder areas and are formed over the years from the current depositing little bits of sand and shell. Additionally, they can change year to year depending on the amount of current. Here we can see the same bar really well because it's outlined with this grass. Now when you hear guys talk about ditches or troughs, a lot of times what this is a depression just like this that is between two bars on a flat. These usually have softer bottom. All right, now I got a question on the Alabama rig video about what is an inside turn, and that's another important piece of structure you need to know about. An inside turn is literally just a dip in on any lake structure. So if we zoom in here, we've got a ledge running down through here, and you can see the contours are really tight in this area, really tight in this area, and then they bow inside and create almost like a horseshoe or oxbow. If I zoom in here, this area right here is an inside turn. Now an outside turn is the other area here. We see a little protrusion out. It's almost like a small point. However, it's on a ledge. You can also find these. Let me see if I can find one here. Here's a main lake point that has an inside turn on a main lake point. You can have inside turns on humps as well in other structures. Here's an outside turn. There's an outside. That's more of the point itself. There's a little outside turn on a main lake point. Now these can be really subtle, such as these really small ones here, or they can be more noticeable like the ones that we looked at a moment ago. All right, the last thing I want to talk with you about is a pocket or a slough. Typically, these are considered a cut off the main river or a creek that doesn't have consistent water flow. So these are areas that might contain a drain or they might be dry pockets. For instance, if I zoom in here, we don't have any note that there's any water that flows into the back of this thing, even with rain. Here's another pocket. This is a much bigger pocket that runs back into here. Again, we don't see that there's any water coming into the back of it. Now, unfortunately, on the Navionics web app, I can't actually go in here and create markers for you guys. So what I would encourage you to do is get on your smartphone, download the Navionics app on your phone, and what you can do then is you can actually create points. So homework for you guys, go into your local waterway or the area that you like to fish or you have an upcoming tournament at, and go through and mark by yourself a bunch of these structures, whether it's onshore, offshore, or anything in between, and it'll start giving you some practice so when we do our live streams you'll have a better indication of what I'm talking about. Okay, hope those visuals and definitions help you better understand the structure in your lake. It should help you break down the lake better, and once we go into those details on the live streams, you'll have this in the back of your mind and understand what you're looking for. Again, I encourage you to do the same thing for your local body of water. Not only will it help you, but again, it'll solidify these terms in your mind. Finally, guys, don't forget to tune into the first live stream. It's going to be this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're going to break down Lake Chickamauga. Also, I'm going to be at the East Tennessee Fishing Show. I think I'm going to be there Thursday morning and definitely Saturday and Sunday, so make sure you come by the Bass Attitude and Hog Farmer booth and come see me. As always, make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and go ahead and share the video with your friends. It really helps me a lot. I hope this week finds you out on the water, and I'll catch you there.